past, deciding what movie to watch or what album to listen to involved a lot of guesswork, word of mouth from your friends and family, or reading a newspaper. Nowadays, it's as simple as going online, looking at Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic, and getting a nice little score that tells you the supposed quality of the thing that you're trying to consume. These platforms have changed and revolutionized the way that we engage with art and entertainment, but it's not all just thumbs up and 5-star reviews. And it makes you think sometimes if we've lost the ability to think for ourselves. For instance, one of the more curious things about these aggregated scores is they influence the way we feel about a work after the fact. Like, you've been there, I'm sure. You've seen a film that you've really enjoyed, and then you check the Rotten Tomatoes score and see that it's only sitting at like a 45%. And then suddenly you're starting to doubt yourself and your own taste. Like, did I miss something? Like, is my taste that bad? On the flip side, you might sit through a movie that everybody loves, but you find extremely boring. So then these scores become a yardstick by which we measure our own reaction to the films or the music that we're listening to. And that can ultimately change the way we perceive the experience. It's almost as if these scores are shaping our opinions on the films rather than the other way around. And in that sense, all of these aggregates are influencing not only what we watch, but how we feel about them. Which creates this weird thing where we not only judge the art based on how we feel about it, but based on the correct way to feel about it based on the score. And even beyond that, it fosters a sense of dependency on consensus critical reviews rather than having the nuance of each individual critic and what they liked and disliked. Before Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic, people had to actually trust their own feelings on how they felt about a film or album. And then these platforms came along and offered the opportunity to do all of that thinking for you, boiling down a complex piece of art into a simple number or percentage. This shift towards aggregation has streamlined the process of decision making. Why spend time looking up the film's plot or the director or the actors that are in it when you can just look at that green splat and know that it's a disaster? For the artists creating these works, these platforms can be both a blessing and a curse. For instance, a high Rotten Tomatoes score can turn a small indie film into a worldwide hit. Take 2017's Get Out, which benefited greatly from the 98% on Rotten Tomatoes, propelling it from a niche horror film to a cultural phenomenon, which eventually led it to become the most profitable film of all time. Similarly, an artist like Kendrick Lamar, who had a 97% on Metacritic for his album To Pimp a Butterfly, can solidify their position as a cultural and artistic force with such glowing aggregate praise. But here's the thing, if a work has a bad score on these sites, it's like climbing Mount Everest with one arm tied behind your back wearing flip-flops, trying to actually make that work a success. Even movies that may have been misunderstood gems are often buried under the weight of a low score. Like, for instance, Suicide Squad in 2016 had a 26% on Rotten Tomatoes, but a lot of fans will swear by this film to this day. And who knows, maybe more fans would have liked it if it didn't have that low score. When your film is dubbed rotten, it may never recover commercially no matter how many audience members differ in that opinion. And us consuming based on this review culture has made audiences risk-averse, which in turn produces less daring projects. The people that pay for these movies, the people that pay for these albums don't want to have to take the risk of losing their money on something new and innovative. But that also means we don't get the new and innovative things that we possibly could have. And because audiences are consuming these things in a way that follows the scores, the people with the money say, okay, let's make something with the score like this. Let's make something that will get us the highest possible score, which makes it less risky because they're basing this off of focus groups and internet research and algorithms rather than making a risk and having a hit that was unexpected. Like, if something has less than a 70% on Rotten Tomatoes or a Metascore less than 60, most people won't even give it a chance. Which is crazy because there were so many works of art that was considered bad when they came out, but with hindsight, in a couple of years or even a couple of months, they were considered great. And the people that should be upset about this the most is young people. Most of these critics are older and not in your generation, so taste will shift and change based on that. I remember watching a Roger Ebert interview talking about Star Wars, and he was there with another older critic who hated it, and Roger Ebert loved it. Roger Ebert was young at the time, so he understood it more than the older critic. That's how these things work.
Obviously, let's face it, they are for children or for childish adults. They're not for adult mentalities.
And I would say not that I'm childlike, but that he is old at heart.
We don't often pick movies or music based on word of mouth anymore. In the past, Every year there was something that became a surprise hit based solely on word of mouth. Now it's about what the algorithm feeds to us and what these scores are telling us. So the power players can game the system and make a score higher or make a score appear to be higher, even though the quality may not be as good as something with a score that's lower or not even rated at all. Metacritic is more complex because it has a more broad sense of things that they're reviewing. It does movies, music, TV, video games, all different kinds of things. So if this score is less than 80 or even 90, a lot of people won't give it a chance because it's not worth their time. And this process limits the potential of discovery. How many countless albums and films could you have loved if you had given them a chance beyond their aggregate scores? And we all do this. Sometimes I'm sitting down to watch a movie and I'm like, I want to watch something new, but I want it to be good. So I'll pass over films with lower scores rather than checking those out and building my own opinion on them just to go for the higher scored things. And a lot of times I'm disappointed because the higher scored things sometimes aren't even that good. We've reached the point where good marketing alone can't save a project. It's tied to the numbers on these websites. A big criticism of both Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes is they don't often reflect the view of general audiences. We've all seen a film that has like an 85% from the critics and like a 50% from the audiences. For instance, Star Wars The Last Jedi has a whopping 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, but only a 42% from audiences, which makes me ask the question, are critics out of touch or are audience goers just resistant to new and innovative things? The truth is, critics and audiences are looking for different things in a film. Critics may be looking for artistic risks and subtext, and audiences might just be wanting to see a spaceship blow up. Different people have different tastes, which is subjective, despite the attempt to quantify their opinions and feelings. Marketing teams will often lean heavily on these scores to promote something like a film. I'm sure you've seen trailers that boast that their film is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. And in some cases, the marketing revolves completely around the score. This creates a feedback loop where the high score interests viewers and they become more engaged with the film before it even comes out. This can be positive. For instance, Mad Max Fury Road in 2015 leveraged its sky-high 97% on Rotten Tomatoes to draw in more viewers who might not have otherwise watched a film that was a sequel to a decades-old franchise. By the time it hit audiences, the buzz generated by critics was already half the marketing. While review aggregators have boosted the success of indie films like Lady Bird, which has a 99% on Rotten Tomatoes, and Moonlight, which has a 98 score on Metacritic, they also exacerbate the failures of major studio projects. Blockbuster films like Justice League, which has a 40% on Rotten Tomatoes, suffer from low scores that casted a shadow over their massive budgets and marketing blitzes. Critics may enjoy the cerebral indie flick, but general audiences still want to see superhero battles and CGI explosions. This creates an interesting dichotomy where large films are failing based on their scores and small films are succeeding based on theirs. And while Rotten Tomatoes may be the more well-known platform, Metacritic is more niche but has its own unique way of scoring things. Metacritic's weighted average considers not only the critic's score, but also the reputation of the critic, which theoretically makes it more reliable. However, in practice, both platforms fall into the same trap of oversimplifying complex art. For example, The Witch in 2015 holds a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, but the score is more divided on Metacritic at an 83, reflecting how some critics saw it as a masterpiece of a slow burn horror, while others found it way too slow. These slight differences in numbers can lead to radically different interpretations of a film's success, and audience scores are a double-edged sword in themselves. On the one hand, they democratize the review process, giving everyday viewers a voice alongside professional critics. On the other hand, they can be easily manipulated by angry fan bases or trolls. A film can be review bombed by people who haven't even seen it but have an axe to grind. Captain Marvel saw its audience score plummet due to organized backlash from groups who opposed its feminist themes, but that wasn't reflected in the consensus of 79% from critics. Audiences also having the ability to review these things brings out often the worst parts of internet culture. Reducing works of art to a cold number makes it difficult for audiences to attach themselves emotionally. What works for this person may not work for someone else, and that's the beauty of art. But because of these scores, we're not giving things a shot, or we're not trusting our own feelings about things. And the individual's opinion and taste are being lost. A work of art is not just thumbs up or thumbs down. It's not just fresh or rotten. There are areas in the middle that are gray that some people attach themselves to and some want to distance themselves from. Whether we realize it or not, we're passively accepting aggregate culture and consensus thinking towards art. And the individual's taste plays such a huge part in the enjoyment of art. Art is not subjective, which I've done a video on, by the way. You should check it out here. I mean, it's not all bad though, like these things can be a godsend. For somebody that has very limited time and very limited money, you can spend your money on watching a movie that is good or bad. And these things can often steer you away from the bad movies and more towards the movies that you would like. I mean, nobody has the time to watch every bad movie out there after all. Plus, a lot of times these platforms can resurge old movies that we didn't even know we would like. It can make an old movie that might have been dismissed or forgotten have new life by new critics re-evaluating it. I guess my biggest issue is the fact that we're all turning into one big groupthink. I don't like that. If you solely base the things that you're going to consume on these aggregate scores, you're missing out on so many opportunities to expand your way of thinking and expand your taste. The individual is being lost in these aggregates, and they're not necessarily always a bad thing. I like Rotten Tomato scores. I like Metacritic scores. But I've also developed my taste for many, many years in music and movies before they were really that popular. I guess all I'm saying is don't be afraid to check out something new because the score isn't good. If it looks interesting to you, check it out. Sometimes what's great to you is bad to others. Don't miss the opportunity to consume some good art just because somebody else doesn't like it.